America has always been a strange country. Beyond the political and financial spheres, for most people, their first impression of it is inextricably linked to contraband, ultimately, or is it due to their drug control philosophy, which combines treatment with regulation. Moreover, while the law is cracking down on illicit drug crimes, also leaves some room for relative tolerance. For instance, some states have legalized marijuana. What's worse, this has also plunged the United States into a severe real world predicament when drugs originally intended for pain relief became the most dangerous and sought-after illegal drug in the country, and the criminal activities spawned by this have grown even more rampant. Some are chasing the dream of striking it rich, will do anything to get a piece of the action in Los Angeles. While others find themselves trapped in the eye of the storm and find it impossible to break free. When the hunter, lurking in the shadows, is mistaken for the prey by the ignorant, the fangs they bear will ultimately demand the price for their arrogance. Hello everyone, today, let's dive into File 266 in the action section. The price of sin. Henry heads to a restaurant for a meal, all by himself. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to two uninvited guests. On the surface, both sides remain calm and composed, but in reality, his hand was already on the grip of his gun. The two were planning to catch him off guard, but Henry was just a step faster. Not only did he take down the bald guy with a single shot, he then dodged a bullet with a swift move and, in the same motion, took out the mustached man with two quick shots. And with two quick shots, took down the mustached man. As Henry went back to his coffee, the screaming customers had just made it to the door. He calmly takes the man's phone to find out who was pulling the strings. And for Henry, scenes like this were just another day at the office. As a subordinate to Rosie, Los Angeles' biggest drug lord, Henry's daily life is a constant dance on the edge of a knife, from a street punk to the underground kingpin controlling Los Angeles' entire contraband network. And transformed into the underground kingpin controlling Los Angeles' entire illicit goods network. And of course, Rosie was a master of his craft, but now, the black gangs in his network were starting to get restless. So, Rosie immediately sends Henry and his partner, a guy they call Little Black, to handle it. Take out that street boss, Tyson. And Henry, of course, knew exactly what was behind it all because of fentanyl, a drug that spreads faster than the plague. A lethal drug with a fatal dose of just 2 milligrams. A dose as small as 4 grains of sand is all it takes to send you to meet your maker, but the profits it generates are higher than any other illegal drug on the market. Where there's a huge reward, there's always someone willing to risk it all. And there will always be those willing to risk it all. Anyone would take a risk for a huge payoff, but the price they pay is often one they can't afford. Henry and his partner, guns drawn, stealthily infiltrate Tyson's stronghold, but all they found was the still warm body of a police officer on the floor. But before the other agent could even react, he was instantly taken down by a bullet fired from the shadows. Just then, two LAPD officers, one with a ponytail and one with a buzz cut, show up. And they immediately take Henry into custody. Then, Chief Bruce shows up, a smug, wicked smile on his face. He raises his gun to finish the job. And blows Xiaohei's head off. The gangsters turn on each other. A shootout between cops and robbers. Both sides were killed in the firefight. The mastermind is brought to justice, and all of this will be the official conclusion of the case file. And Henry, who had done nothing wrong, was left with no room to argue. Tyson was once the head of several top street gangs in Los Angeles. 2/3 of the local black community fell under his command. He set up numerous labs throughout Los Angeles. His subordinate, Nightingale, was in charge of mixing and repackaging the drugs. Then, his men distribute and sell it. Such a blatant move, naturally, infuriated Rossi. That's why he ordered the execution of the middleman, Xiaohei. He wanted to make an example of him. To cover up this dirty conspiracy, and Henry was just another pawn to be sacrificed. Thrown out to take the fall, but losing a man was not a concern for Rosie, because, unbeknownst to all, he had a top-tier, retired assassin on his payroll, and that man is the big shot known as Jimmy. And now, he's back in the game. In the courtroom, the lawyer laid out all the crimes Henry had committed. The gun from the crime scene was also found to have Henry's fingerprints on it. His own lawyer only offered a token defense. And fell silent. The judge immediately sentenced Henry to life in prison, and the sheriff and lawyer who made it all happen were handsomely rewarded by Rosie. Tyson's capitulation boosted Rosie's profits by at least a quarter. This boosted Rosie's profits by at least a quarter. As for Henry's sacrifice, it seemed to matter very little, but what Rosie had no idea of was that this supposedly clean subordinate of hers, what secrets could this seemingly spotless subordinate possibly be hiding? Las Vegas, 3 years ago, top agent Henry is secretly assigned a top-secret mission by his superior, Sam. He had to abandon his identity. And sever all ties with his former life. And assume a new identity for an undercover operation, and the organization he was infiltrating was none other than the up-and-coming Rosie, and with that, Henry's file was completely sealed. Only his superior had the authority to access it. And the true nature of this mission was a secret known only to the two of them. Once the details of the operation were finalized, Sam had turned one of Rosie's men in Las Vegas, a guy they call Long Hair. Later, he secured his parole by introducing Henry to the gang, but Chang Mao had just been released from prison. The police found it in the trunk of a car on the side of the road. And discovered his brutally murdered body, and the one behind the murder was, once again, Rossi. He had suspected Henry's true identity for a long time. But he could never find any evidence. All he could do was stay on his guard at all times. He was waiting for him to slip up, but thanks to Henry's flawless cover, Rosie never got the chance to pull out this thorn in his side. Of course, this very vigilance is also the reason Rosie has never been caught. Sam quickly got the news that Henry had been imprisoned, and of course, Sam wasn't just going to stand by and do nothing. Soon, a transfer order came through from the prison. Henry was to be transferred to a prison in Las Vegas. And the commander in charge of the transfer was none other than Sam himself. It's been a long time. Sam had aged considerably, but he's still as reliable as ever. He's already contacted Judge Fitz to vouch for him and get Henry acquitted, and Rossi's business was their ultimate target. He couldn't help but wonder how many more teenagers would die from overdoses. In that moment, Henry's thoughts flashed to his own family. A chill ran down his spine, and just as he was frozen in fear, meanwhile, Rossi's own scheme was also moving forward. Bruce heads to a nightclub to find Tyson. He tracks down Tyson. He revealed that Henry was about to be transferred. As a close friend of Henry, and there was no way Tyson was going to let his brother's killer get away. The next morning, sure enough, while en route, the two were being tailed by a car. Sam immediately slammed on the gas and sped off. He steers the car into a secluded, dead-end spot. Tyson thought all that was left was to close in for the kill. Little did they know, they had walked right into a hunter's trap. Both sides bailed out of their cars, and a fierce gunfight immediately erupted. Tyson and his men immediately grabbed their shotguns and submachine guns, unleashing a barrage of suppressive fire. But incredibly, Henry braved the hail of bullets and landed a headshot, taking his opponent down. But tragically, Tyson also managed to break Sam's neck. Even though Henry immediately riddled him with bullets, but it was too late to save his partner's life. Amidst the blaring sirens, he had no choice but to flee the scene. From the moment Sam died, Henry was no longer a cop. But a lone, wandering spirit caught in the eye of the storm. With Tyson's death, the entire supply chain of his subordinate organization was completely shattered. Furious, Rosie storms into the law firm. He questions Henry about why he was transferred. That's when he found out it was Judge Fitz who had vouched for him. Rosie immediately called Jimmy into action, and his intervention is bound to bring about a bloody death. Bruce leads his team to investigate the scene. The sheer brutality of the crime scene left all three of them utterly shaken. Bruce fought to keep his fear in check. A statewide bolo has been issued, and the reason was obvious. Henry wasn't surprised the police would jump to that conclusion, but before he could be arrested, he had to meticulously plan his next move. Henry, of course, was also aware of Jimmy's existence. His only fear was that Jimmy would find out the truth about him and go after his family, and now, he has no choice but to act fast. He had to intercept Jimmy first, and meanwhile, Rosie also gave the order to seize all of Tyson's assets, but the various factions under his command would never just give up their piece of the pie. The two sides, arriving one after another, immediately erupted into a massive battle, and just like that, a massive shootout erupted. The entire city of Los Angeles had descended into absolute chaos. The distraught lawyer could never have imagined Henry would actually come looking for him, even though he cooperated and told them everything he knew about Rosie, but he still couldn't escape getting his head blown off. Staring at the body, Bruce was lost in thought. Meanwhile, upon hearing the news, Rosie was also overcome with anxiety. At this point, both of them were burning with curiosity. Just who the hell is Henry? To track him down, Bruce even had his men stake out Henry's house. Henry, returning for the money and the gun, is spotted by the two men. Just as they had hoped, they immediately raised their guns and crept inside, but little did they know, the faint noises from outside had already put Henry on high alert. As the two of them cleared the rooms one by one, he's already raised his shotgun. He blasts the ponytail right off her head. Seeing this, the crew cut guy immediately returned fire. But Henry had already ducked for cover. Furious and desperate, the crew cut man charges forward, firing wildly, but Henry seized the opportunity. Two quick shots riddled him with holes. By the time Bruce rushed to the scene, all he saw were bloodstains covering the walls of the room. All that awaited him were the cold bodies of his men. Upon hearing the news, Rossi was absolutely certain this was a ritual of vengeance. But for a seemingly honest and ordinary guy like Henry, just how did he get to be so deadly? But all the answers would have to come from Jimmy. He went to the Fitz's house alone and knocked on the door, and in the blink of an eye, he's taken him hostage on the spot. The judge, after taking a beating, tried to reason with him. But it only brought him more pain. Seeing that Jimmy was clearly enjoying the interrogation, the judge had no choice but to reveal the truth. Based on the intel from Sam, he confirmed that Henry was from a special operations team in Las Vegas. He captured two world-class drug lords in Colombia and Mexico. Without a doubt, Henry is a trained killing machine. Once he has you in his sights, death is the only outcome, and what's even more ridiculous is, Bruce even framed him for shooting a cop, not once, but twice. Whose friend and whose foe? The truth is plain to see. Jimmy then plunges a knife into Rosie's thigh. He tightens his grip and slowly twists the blade. The old man, in excruciating pain, fights to hold on, but he was still no match for Jimmy's ruthlessness. Upon learning the truth, Rosie immediately arranges a meeting with Bruce. And tells him everything. The good news is, he's not a triple agent. The bad news is, he's a useless copy. Rosie would only give him 24 hours to find Henry. Or he'd have to answer with his head. All Bruce could do was wear a grim expression. All he could do was wear a worried look on his face. In a city this vast, so where was he supposed to find another man? Little did he know, he wouldn't have to look at all. Henry would come to him, but before Bruce could even react, he was blasted away by a shotgun on the spot. And that's not all. Henry then used Bruce's phone to send a message to Rosie, even though it was just early in the morning, but a chill ran down Rosie's spine. But Henry didn't make his move on him just yet. Instead, he made a call to his wife. After 3 long years, Pat finally heard her husband's voice again. She could hardly believe her ears, but Henry had no time for catching up. He just told her to pack her bags, and fast, take the kids and go hide at your parents' place for now. And Henry's instructions weren't without reason, because Jimmy had already snuck into her house. He moves through the house, pistol with a silencer drawn, checking every corner, and just as he suspected, he found a photo of Henry with his son. Unfortunately, but the mother and son were nowhere to be found. Back in his car, Jimmy immediately calls his boss to report. Hearing that gentle voice again, Jimmy was in high spirits, but just then, Henry suddenly appeared out of nowhere. And from the back seat, he viciously choked him. Jimmy fought back with all his might, struggling desperately, but Henry still managed to snap his neck, and just like that, the legendary killer who once ruled the underworld met his end, without even a last word. Meanwhile, Henry was cruising in his luxury sports car. He sped all the way to his mother-in-law's house, seeing her husband again. Patty was overcome with emotion, but 3 years of pent-up grief and worry also brought her to tears. But all the pain from the past 3 years welled up, bringing her to tears. Seeing this, Henry had no intention of hiding the truth any longer. He decisively revealed that he was on an undercover mission. This mission cost him his identity as a police officer. And was constantly hunted by a group of extremely dangerous terrorists. He even put his own family in harm's way. But now, it's all coming to an end. All Patty has to do for now is lay low with her son until he returns safely. He promises it won't be for long. He vowed to keep the mother and son safe, just as the two were lost in a moment of intimacy. But instead, Rosie just cursed out Jimmy's memorial photo, and now, all the cards he had up his sleeve were on the table. And to make matters worse, Henry was lurking in the shadows, watching like a hungry tiger. God knows he had taken every precaution. How could he have failed to see that he was a beast, lying in wait? How he wished, at that moment, that his opponent was just a cop. At least there's still the law to fall back on. But of course, expecting a drug lord and a killer to play by the rules, that's just a fool's dream. Rosie had no choice but to call in all his men. He ordered them to spread the word. Every thug, gangster, and junkie, anyone, as long as they can bring Henry to him, and they'll get $1 million in cash. And I don't care if he's dead or alive. It was clear that Rosie was truly terrified, even though his men were just a bunch of good-for-nothings, but they were also his last hope. But of course, Henry had no intention of taking them on head-on. Instead, he decided to turn their own game against them. He started a public scene in the bar, looking for trouble, and just as he'd hoped, he caught the attention of a couple of local thugs. The two immediately pulled out their knives and closed in on him, not threatening him to come with them. Henry couldn't help but find the situation amusing, but he still played along and put up a bit of a struggle. Otherwise, if these two goons were in his hands, they wouldn't last 3 seconds. There's a reason they say ignorance is bliss. If these two guys had ever heard of the Trojan horse, they probably wouldn't have acted so foolishly, but instead, they ended up bringing Henry along to kick down Rosie's door. Unfortunately, the two never even got to see the ransom. One of them was shot dead on the spot by Henry, and the other was used as a human shield. And Wasley taken out of the picture. The thug, acting like he's facing a whole army, starts screaming his lungs out, trying to hype himself up, but little did he know, Henry was already closing in from behind, putting a bullet right through his head. But just as Henry was searching for any sign of Rosie, but in the shadows, another pistol was slowly being raised from behind. Unfortunately for her, the boss lady's aim was way off. The shot only grazed his shoulder, but Henry played along, remaining perfectly still. All he had to do was wait for her to come closer and check. The boss lady, overconfident and careless, thought she had just pulled off a major coup, but Henry suddenly sprang to his feet, pumping 2 bullets right through her. She stumbles and falls into the pool while his home was being massacred. Meanwhile, Rosie is hiding out, drinking at a bar. It wasn't that he didn't trust his own men. Quite the opposite. It was because he trusted them too much. When it comes down to it, this was nothing more than a stalling tactic, but what he truly wanted was to leave the city for good. Henry, for his part, was in no hurry to end this game of cat and mouse either. Instead, he heads back to his hotel to tend to his wounds. The threat he posed was like the sword of Damocles, hanging perpetually over Rosie's head. Every moment that passed, the more his enemy would suffer. After fleeing all the way to Las Vegas, Rosie thought he was finally safe. Little did he know, this place was practically Henry's backyard. If you're looking for someone to blame Jimmy for giving such a vague tip. He didn't mention that Henry was a local cop in Las Vegas. Rosie, on the other hand, felt like the world was his oyster. And the sky's the limit. Meanwhile, Henry, in turn, makes a call to the local police department. Revealing his undercover identity, and that's the beauty of having a file on record. Even though Sam was dead, there was still the hard evidence on paper to prove Henry's identity. Completely in the dark, Rosie only received the news that Henry had turned himself in, and with his heart finally at ease to celebrate, he even proactively called for Nightingale to come and serve him. But, with his eyes closed in bliss, he didn't notice a thing. The look on Nightingale's face grew more and more terrified. Not until he saw the dark muzzle of a gun right next to his head. It was only then that Rosie realized the game was up. But unfortunately, it was all over. When a man commits a crime, God becomes completely separated from life, and this is the madness of sin and the price of sin. The End. The Price of Sin is an American crime thriller set to be released in 2026. If I were to rate this film on a 5-star scale, for the action, I'd give it 3 stars. The film doesn't feature a lot of close-quarters combat. Most of the fighting is just gun battles. However, the unpredictable assassination still create a great deal of suspense, character and acting. For stars, the protagonist, played by Paul Sloan, feels incredibly real. On one side, he's a cop. And on the other, a criminal. On one hand, he's a husband, and on the other, a killer. This sense of being torn and conflicted, and this is brought vividly to life through his character. I give the plot and logic 4.5 stars. I'm sure many of you have noticed the influence of other films in this one. Take Infernal Affairs, for example. Or take New World, for instance, another undercover agent who has lost his identity. This film doesn't just feature those super satisfying, one-man revenge sequences. And even has the protagonist get his identity back in the end, and that ending, well, it's actually quite heartwarming. So, what did you guys think after watching it? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Alright everyone, that's all for today's case file. Alright everyone, that's all for today's file review. Please remember to like and subscribe. See you in the next file. Bye bye.